Okay. All right. So again, welcome everybody. Today we will be exploring how cities are addressing the impacts of the homelessness crisis in their local parks. There's a lot of interest in this topic, as I think many of you know, this session filled quite fast. We added a second one next week, so a lot of interest in this topic. We just wanted to start with a quick overview of the format of the session so that you know what to expect today. So as we mentioned in our reminder email, peer conversations focus on interaction and discussion rather than just listening to presentations. We know that this topic is very complex and that much of what drives homelessness is beyond the ability of park leaders to control. So this is not meant to be a training or an exhaustive list of best practices, but really an opportunity for you to connect with other people from around the country and to learn from each other regarding challenges, potentially promising strategies, partnerships, that kind of thing. So that said, we do start peer conversations with a couple of kickoff speakers who share the work that they're doing on the topic, which helps to kind of introduce some promising models and also helps to get the conversation going. So I'll introduce our kickoff speakers today. We are joined by Helen Beck, who is a PhD candidate at the University of Washington. Helen has done research about place-based care models in parks around the country and will share the strategies and partnerships that she has researched. We are also joined by Natasha Shoyinka, Director of Supportive Services for the Atlanta Downtown Improvement District's Homeless Outreach Program. So Natasha will talk about their model for connecting homeless individuals to services. So welcome to both of you, and thanks so much for your time today. After we hear from Helen and Natasha, we will have a large group discussion, and then we will break out into small group discussions, which is where we're going to spend quite a bit of time, about half an hour in small group discussions, and then we will come together for just a quick final share out. There was a lot of response to the open-ended questions we asked you during registration, so we will pull in some of those issues and questions as needed during the discussion. And we would like to just remind folks that there are lots of different perspectives on these issues. We would like this to be a safe space where you can share your challenges or thoughts in an honest way. So we just ask that attendees please be respectful and open to what others share, and hopefully we will learn from each other today. So I just wanted to do a few tech reminders. I don't at the moment see anybody who has joined as a group, but I do just want to mention that peer conversations are one attendee per registration to just maintain a more intimate feeling and to better facilitate audio and video participation. So if you've joined with a group that is using one computer, please at this time just choose one person to participate, and the other folks can hop off and you can share that recording with your team members afterward. In terms of some other tech issues, of course, I think at this point we're all familiar, just leave yourself muted when you're not speaking. Please turn webcams on as much as possible, especially during discussion portions, as this is meant to be an interactive environment. And then you can join the conversation in a couple of ways. You can raise your hand using the reactions icon. You can also type your question or comment into the chat, but depending on how much activity is going on in the chat, it's probably going to be your best bet to raise your hand if you really want to jump in with a question or comment. But we will do our best to monitor the chat. And then again, just want to remind you that the session is being recorded. So I think that's it for kind of some of the housekeeping. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Helen to tell you about her research on place-based care models in parks. So Helen, take it away.
Okay, thank you. I would just share my screen. Bear with me. Let me know if this appears. Oh, apologies. Let's get the correct thing up. There we are. Can you all see this okay?
Yes, looks good.
Fantastic. Okay.
Oh, wait, now we have your notes.
Oh, we do. So how do, I'm so sorry, everyone. How do we swap that so I can still see my notes? But
I think if you go to display settings at the top there.
Yeah.
And then try swapping. Oh, it's not letting
swap
you.
presenter view and slideshow. Let me go out.
Okay.
And it worked perfectly, didn't it?
Try just going to slideshow up there at the top.
Um,
The top navigation, transitions, animation, slideshow, and then play from beginning. That might work.
Where do you mean, sorry?
So if you go over at the top, it's like home, insert, draw,
Yeah.
design, and then if you keep going over, there's slideshow.
Uh-huh.
And if you hit slideshow from beginning, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see your notes, but give that a try. If you hit from beginning, it'll.
Sure.
Is that
Okay.
good?
Yeah, so you can see my size. I just can't see my notes.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. It's all right. We'll go for it. Okay. So it worked perfectly in practice. But anyway, thank you. And as Diana said, I'm going to start today's conversation by talking about my PhD research. And this is focused on the management and delivery of urban public park and recreation services in the context of a housing and homelessness crisis. And my research is really focusing on the tangible ways in which the managers of our space, of our parks and public spaces, and the managers of our recreation amenities can work to provide spaces and services that are inclusive, caring, welcoming, and comfortable for all user groups. My research is focused on urban areas with populations of people experiencing houselessness. So I focused on the city of Seattle, where I'm currently based. I've looked at Woodruff Park and the surrounding downtown areas in Atlanta, which Natasha is going to talk about. And then in the coming months, I hope to focus on innovative work in Franklin Park in Washington, DC. So I'll spend a few moments today just setting the scene in regard to homelessness and public parks. And I'll talk about this concept of place-based care and how it might offer us a strategy going forward. And then I'll pass on to Natasha, who will talk about their amazing work in Atlanta. So firstly, what do we know about homelessness in relation to urban parks? Well, we know that homelessness is mainly urban. In 2022, 6 out of 10 people experiencing unsheltered homelessness were located in an urban area. And we do have an idea of overall numbers of homelessness in specific areas via city point-in-time counts. Though I should caution that these point-in-time counts are likely an undercount because they collect data one night in January and only focus on those that are visibly homeless at that point in time. And to give you an idea, in Seattle, where I live, the official figures for this year, for January 2024, told us that there are 9,810 people living unsheltered in the Seattle King County area. And we know via City of Seattle data collection that in late 2023, they counted 523 tents and 227 RVs located throughout the city. And some of these tents and RVs will have been on land that's owned and managed by Seattle Parks and Rec. But unfortunately, the official data doesn't actually tell us location, and it may well be the case for you in your cities as well. And we know that homelessness is not equally distributed across the population, with people of colour disproportionately represented, along with those living below the poverty line and those with mental illness or individuals struggling with addiction. And then turning to think specifically about urban parks and homelessness, the existing empirical evidence really doesn't tell us too much. You know, public parks are one of the few amenities alongside public libraries that are free of charge to access. And although they were, certainly not originally designed as spaces to meet people's daily survival and shelter needs, in some areas, without a doubt, they're being used in that way. But we don't know with any clarity how many people regularly depend on public parks for their shelter and survival. We don't know how these spaces serve as residences for those that are experiencing houselessness. And there is currently no well-developed body of research or best practice looking at the responses of agencies to homelessness. But despite this, dearth of official information, many public park and recreation agencies are undoubtedly, responding to issues of homelessness, and I'm sure that's not news to you in the room today. And many agencies are thinking through new ways to serve their communities and considering different responses whilst engaged in this incredibly delicate and complex balancing act of trying to keep spaces clean, open and safe for all. And this question about how best to respond to homelessness fits the definition of a wicked problem. It's complex. There's no easy or straightforward solutions, and there's a lot of disagreement on the way forward. And this observation might resonate with people today. The only research I found as part of my scoping work that directly asks public park and recreation agencies how they're responding to homelessness. It was conducted back in 2016, and it was a survey done by the National Recreation and Park Association, so the NRPA. And now this reports that over half of the 65 agencies who responded said they do offer services aimed at individuals experiencing houselessness. And these were things like access to restrooms or shower programs or shelter. So shelter programs during inclement weather, so very hot or cold weather. But most were spending less than 10% of their annual budget on these services, these interventions, and lacked dedicated staff for this purpose. And other responses to this survey rely heavily on police-led action or hostile design interventions. So 3 in 4 of the agencies in the survey said that they are using or are looking at using hostile design to discourage people from being in their park during the night. So things like the special park bench design, the benches you can't sleep on, or installing security cameras in their park spaces. Now, my PhD fieldwork is ongoing, and so far I've conducted 48 interviews with individuals in the Seattle and Atlanta area, and 38 of these are with paid staff, predominantly park and rec professionals, and then 10 are with people experiencing chronic homelessness. And in my interviews, many of the park professionals talk very eloquently about the challenges they're facing. So people are reporting that their roles and responsibilities are changing. And some are really worried that they lack the necessary skills and knowledge going forward, and feel, quite honestly, that this is not what they signed up for, that dealing with the impacts of homelessness shouldn't be part of their role or isn't something they anticipated being part of their role. And some of the interviewees talked about how they try on an ad hoc basis to respond to the needs of vulnerable unhoused individuals using their spaces. And that can make them feel unsafe. And they are unsure, they question whether they're actually doing the right thing. Oops. So my perspective is, as long as there is need, as long as there is a housing crisis, people experiencing houselessness will continue to use parks and continue to seek respite in public parks. So my research is focused on tangible ways to approach park management and recreational service delivery within this context, whilst also recognising, as Diana said earlier, that homelessness is a huge structural problem, and it's not something that park agencies can solve. And And I first came across the concept of place-based care within the work of Karen E. Till, who's a cultural geographer. And she talks about a place-based ethic of care as providing a chance to create and plan for more socially just cities. And it's an idea of situated or place-based care as offering a strategy forward in terms of getting to know people in the spaces they use on a daily basis and thinking through the ways in which we can assist people in the spaces they use on a daily basis. So what could this look like in public parks? And we know that the managers of our public park and recreation centres, often very aware of, very familiar with the unhoused individuals using their spaces, and often have a good idea of some of the needs and complexities of the individuals already. So place-based care can involve park agencies proactively leveraging relationships with other organisations that are specialists in social care. So it might be organisations you already know, you're already familiar with via other park programmes, or it might mean making new links with and partnerships with local outreach organisations. But either way, it's about bringing in those with the right skills and expertise and training and connections to support. And place-based care can include the provision of park programs that accommodate a range of park user needs. So, for example, by including an opportunity within that program for people to connect with services or access amenities, perhaps that might be a bagged lunch or access to comfort such as a source of heat or blankets or books or clothing. And this is something that one of my Seattle case studies in my research in Freeway Park does on a regular basis. And for them, it was about thinking about equity in addition to equality, and asking, what is it that we need to do as park organisations to help different populations become part of our communities? And place-based care includes thinking about when it's appropriate to use enforcement versus other forms of intervention. And I think by becoming more familiar with people in our spaces, we develop an understanding of what is a bad day versus a deeper crisis that needs a more in-depth form of assistance. And my park and recreation interviewees have been a really fantastic source of ideas around what could help in their communities, what's appropriate in their areas moving forward. So people have suggested within these interviews aligning the existing park programs that are already running, such as summer lunches for children or shower programs, and aligning those with further forms of wraparound support. Some felt it would be fruitful to host a social worker within their recreation centre. And these are centres that are already being visited by people experiencing houselessness. And interviewees have also talked about hosting outreach workers in their parks and in the parks that are particularly hit hard by homelessness. And actually that was something that used to happen in some downtown parks in Seattle, but has sadly ended. Others mentioned citing community clothing or food pantries within spaces that are heavily used by those in need. And then others preferred to think about the higher level structural solutions, such as creating a dedicated role within park and recreation agencies to deal with homelessness, someone with the skills and expertise and time to think about this. And that's something that some public libraries have started to do. And others talked about the need and the importance to put in place the protocols and structures and processes to mitigate that need to provide ad hoc informal interventions that can put park staff and unhoused individuals at risk. So I continue to ask via my research, well, how can this consideration of place-based care potentially change American park management? And I'm going to pass over to Nakasha because their work in Atlanta kind of really typifies this way of working and provides sort of further source of inspiration. So I'll hand over to you, Nakasha, to talk about your work in downtown Atlanta. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Helen. All right, so let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Am I showing my slideshow?
I think if you hit from beginning, it'll give us the.
There we go. Is that we good?
No, we're still seeing your tiles there, which is not necessarily the worst thing in the world, but yeah, it's not. Or try from current slide, maybe. Next to from beginning.
Interesting. There we go. Is that working?
I'm still
No?
seeing your tiles.
Display settings, swaps. Is that good?
No, I don't know if you're sharing a different monitor or something. I mean, you could just keep going if you want.
Good?
No, now go up to display settings because we're seeing a different thing than we were before. So try display settings again and then swap. Okay, that looks good.
Okay, perfect. So hi, everyone. My name is Nakasha Shoyinka. I manage the homeless street outreach team for the Atlanta Downtown Improvement District. A little bit about us. We are a business improvement district made up of about 220 blocks. We cover almost 2 miles, and we have 3 areas of operation. One of our goals is to maintain a clean, safe, and hospitable and vibrant community. And by doing that, we kind of supplement what the city does not do. So we have public safety ambassadors who are the eyes and ears of our downtown. They escort individuals to their cars, they do jump starts, they help people find lost kids. They really just help out in any way in the downtown space, but also collaborate with our police officers to be their eyes and ears as well. We also have our public space maintenance, which is our clean team. You can see one of our big vacs displayed here, as well as one of our clean team members putting in some flowers. They're also our eyes and ears, but also just help to maintain downtown, to clean the streets and to keep it vibrant and beautiful. And then the last area of operation is our outreach team, which I will go into more detail. Together and collaboratively, we help our unhoused population try to get support and services within our district. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the terms that we use with individuals experiencing homelessness so that you all can understand as far as our street outreach program. We mostly deal with individuals who are chronically homeless, which are also called unhoused or unsheltered. Now, these individuals usually have some type of mental health challenge, some type of disability, or substance abuse, and then have had a significant amount of homelessness as far as episodes. So they could be experiencing homelessness for 6 months, and they may go back to finding housing, but then experience homelessness again. So it has to be coupled with a disability, substance abuse, mental health issue, and long-term homelessness. Now, transitional homeless are individuals who have short-term homelessness, and this could be due to some type of incident that happened within their family. Maybe they had a job loss, and maybe they're seeking something more transitional where they can afford to pay for a transitional housing that might be like $10 a night, but they still have the ability to find a job, and they're just literally looking for just that next step up. The last one would be episodic homelessness. Now, these individuals, they move in and out of homelessness and can sometimes be chronically homeless. And so they might have family that they can move in with, or they might need some type of reunification back home to meet with family. And so I just wanted to emphasize that our team specifically works with individuals who are unhoused and who are chronically homeless. Now, specifically our street outreach team, we spend about 75% in the street. Now, none of the individuals that we engage come into our building. And as Helen mentioned about place-based care, we go out into our communities within the 220 blocks and find individuals who are experiencing homelessness and offer them case management and whatever supportive services that may be available to us. Now, with street outreach, specifically in downtown Atlanta, our team covers the 220 blocks, but we also get referrals and are able to refer individuals who need supportive services outside of our district. I do have some agency examples here. You might want to write them down and look them up. We refer these individuals to these different agencies, but also they have street outreach teams that might have one or two people that they send out on call. And the difference between us is our days start out in Woodruff Park, which is our main park in our district, and outside of our typical office. Now, specifically, this is a very small team that we use to cover 220 blocks. I would love to have at least 10 people on our team so that we could cover areas specifically and so that our case managers could stay in that area and build more rapport and trust. But right now our team is pretty small. And so we go within the district and we target different spaces so that we can be more familiar with them. And so that the people in those specific areas, if they're in an encampment or if they're in a space that's very familiar to them, they know where to find us and we know where to find them. Now, I wanted to talk about supportive services. It might be a new term that is being used, and I would say maybe the last 2 years mainstream. What supportive services actually means are those services that are available to individuals that include mental health, case management, housing search and placement, utility deposits, transportation to doctor's appointments, transportation to job interviews, and things like that. Now, specifically, we offer the supportive service of reunification. That is something new that we're doing. Because of where we're located in downtown Atlanta, we have a lot of individuals who are transient. We have a Greyhound station that's located right in our district. And so we have a lot of people who might get robbed or who come to Atlanta looking for different opportunities. And we find them in our parks and they feel like they don't want to stay in Atlanta. So we offer reunification services for that. As Helen mentioned, with place-based care, we have 6 parks within our district, Woodruff Park being our largest. Our team goes to these parks specifically to engage individuals. Our ambassadors, our public safety officers at night, engage these individuals and try to get them services through us. What actually happens is we have a dispatch line where our ambassadors, our public safety officers, and our clean team can call in and create a ticket, which kind of gives us more information about the need of the person. Once that ticket is placed into our dispatch, then our outreach team goes out to where that location is, usually within the park, and offers them any type of services that they need. One of our main services being interim housing is where we have the ability to place individuals in shelter. And those shelters are different areas or in different areas within our district. And we have MOUs with these shelters so that if we have someone who immediately wants to go into shelter, we have the ability to place them that same day, at least within the hour. One of our other supportive service that we also offer is transportation. Transportation could be in the form of our public transit. Transportation could be in the form of a Lyft. And so our outreach team, case managers will call a Lyft or provide those, what we call MARTA cards to individuals once they're on our caseload to provide transportation to where they need to go. Most of our work is based off of collaboration. In this slide, you'll see that there is a Here to Help brochure that we created that has all of the supportive services within our district, but also outside. We hand out these resource brochures to stakeholders in the community, to businesses. We also offer them in a smaller version to our unhoused population, so that if there's something that we could not do right there in that moment, they have the opportunity to call one of those resources themselves. We also have an interagency supportive services forum where we bring agencies within the downtown space to come together collaboratively to talk about the resources that we need, to talk about building the relationships among supportive services agencies so that when we call them, they're available and we know what programming and information that they have, and so that it's current. One of the issues that I found when I first started within the downtown space is that a lot of agencies operate in silos. And so it was difficult to find out what services that they provided so that we can get that clear information to the individuals that we're serving in the parks. A lot of individuals that use our parks as, I would say, day centers and day shelters, they just don't know what's going on. They don't know what's available to them. So we try to make that information very accessible. Even with our business cards, when we're handing out any information, we have a QR code on the back that also has this Here to Help information so that they can access that information almost immediately. This is just some metrics, just to talk about as far as us placing individuals into interim housing, enrolling individuals into our services, giving lift rides and case management engagements. Again, all of this happens within our parks, within our streets, within our libraries that are within our districts. We try to meet individuals where they are. And again, with the 6 parks that we have within the Downtown Improvement District, that is basically our office space that we use to really help people feel safe without having to come into our offices and leave their belongings and leave the space that they're used to. We will, again, transport people right from where they are to whatever that they need, whether it's interim housing, to their doctor's appointments or anything like that. And that's the end of my slideshow, everyone. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nakasha and Helen. So we are gonna move into, oh, Nakasha, you might want to stop sharing your screen.
How do I do that?
Just hit the green.
I'm gonna
button.
just stop your sharing your screen.
you.
Okay. Oh, wait a minute. No, I can't do that. I can only do it by sharing mine. Just hit that green button at the bottom, and then you should be able to stop sharing.
Yeah, it's not. Oh, there we go. Okay.
There you go.
Stop.
Okay.
There you go.
Great. Okay, so thank you so much for kicking off the conversation with that. So, we've just heard a lot about kind of place-based care models. I think there was a lot of interest in the registration questions that we asked about, partnering more, maybe to connect people to services and that sort of thing. I'd like to bring in some of the themes that came in from registration, but before I do that, I just want to see if folks have questions for Nakasha or Helen specifically. And then, there are some other issues and topics that we can kind of bring into this conversation as well. So any questions? Again, the hand raising function is probably the best way. No? Oh, Christina? Yep.
First of all, thank you very much. This question is for Nakasha. For your organization, for your downtown improvement district, is it through the city that you all are doing it, or is it through your park and recreation? It sounds like you're very closely related. In Minneapolis, our DID is separate from our park organization. So I was just curious how that's set up for you all.
Yeah, we are separate. We have an MOU with the city and also with our Georgia State University, which is also on our campus. And we manage our parks, specifically Woodruff Park. So we are completely separate. We don't receive any funding from federal, state, anyone. We operate it ourselves.
And Barry, did you have your hand up?
Yes, my question's for Nakasha. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the supportive services collaboration. And maybe you did and I just missed it, but like, is that kind of a pamphlet that you can hand to individuals that lists kind of resources across different organizations, and if so, it's spanning different organizations and entities, like, I guess, who created that and how is that process? And if you can just kind of maybe highlight it, be great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Absolutely. So initially we had a card that we just combined all the supportive services that are within our district. And then we had a student from Georgia State create a kind of brochure as well. And so our marketing team kind of cleaned it up and then came up with this brochure that we have now. And so these supportive services are inside our district and outside of our district. So whether someone needs assistance, we try to form the collaboration through our interagency meeting so that we can have at least one contact person there so that if we need to reach out, we know we have someone that we can call immediately.
Great, thank
Thank you.
you. All right, I don't see any other hands up. Or is there, oh, Ethan, sorry, did you have a hand up?
Hi, sorry, I was slow to click the button.
Okay.
Is the bid or the improvement district in Atlanta, do you form those teams yourself, or do you work with a contractor like Block by Block to develop a program, or a Block by Block equivalent, or somebody like that?
Yeah, so we created this program ourselves. Initially, in 2019, we had a social worker. We hired one social worker to work in our park. And then when the pandemic happened, we saw a need because all of our supportive service agencies in the downtown space closed. So then we formed our outreach team in 2020, hiring social workers, case managers, things like that. So we formed it on our own.
Great, thank you. So I wanted to, unless other folks have things that they just want to bring up, I'll keep my eye and see if people have their hands up. But I wanted to just share some of the information that came in from registration and maybe focus a little bit on some potential solutions or strategies that folks might be implementing, and just ask folks to share if they're doing some of these things. It seems like some people are. So we asked you a question about, do you feel like it's your responsibility to deal with these issues in parks? And there were some different responses, but the overall sort of consensus is that, we're not solely responsible, but we should play a role in partnership with many other agencies, nonprofits, and community groups. So, kind of a multi-layered approach that we can be part of. And then also we have a responsibility to provide safe spaces for all users and to protect and maintain natural resources. Since those can often face some destruction with things like encampments and things like that. So I think that's something that folks seem to be struggling with. But in terms of solutions, we've both Helen and Nakasha were kind of talking about sort of opportunities for partnership to connect people to services. I'm curious if people either have stories about some effective like cross-agency collaboration that may be starting to develop, maybe folks that have like a centralized department that is charged with looking at solutions to homelessness, or just general partnership that they're doing that seems to be effective, or if people have things like park ranger programs or park ambassador programs that they might want to share a little bit about. Yes, Terrence.
Hi, good afternoon. Terrence, I'm the district manager for Sensei District. We also have a part of Business Improvement District. So in 2016, we actually started our outreach co-responder program, where have an outreach worker and a police officer working together. I was the district manager at the time, so I was the vehicle with the transportation, where we have the teams that actually went out talking to clients throughout the district. So during up until about 2023, we relied on our CSRs, which the same as Atlanta has, but ours is community service reps that did a lot of the outreach with the police officers and a outreach worker from the city Project Home offices. Whereas we transported the individuals to different homeless shelters, safe havens, intake centers, the Hub of Hope, which is under City Hall, which was an intake center that had locations for shower, washing clothes, resources, case management. They served lunch. They had different items for those there. Just recently in 23 and 24, we actually hired two outreach specialists that we still do co-responder with that cover the district, even our parks, which is covers Dilworth Park, City Park, Collins, and Cray Cafe. And they actually talk to all the individuals, and we still do the same model that we had started in 16 of just making sure that they get the help that they need, going to shelters, safe havens, medical attention, mental health crises, anything that was needed that we was able to help them with. So those are some of the things that we've been doing as a co-responder. And within the last probably 6 months, I was able to get a partnership more with the Philadelphia Fire Department that has alternative response units that was dealing with the opioid crisis in K&A Allegheny area, where I could call them for a mental health team and a medic unit to transport someone to a hospital that we felt needed medical transportation first instead of going with one of the police officers. Sometimes we do have officers with us that will say, hey, you really have to go because of the 302 committal that they're going to do for them. And it's there just for their protection, but also the medic unit is there that they have the behavioral health person that if a medical condition goes on while they're going, they have to be Narcan or anything like that, someone's there to take care of that. And if they have any issues of, bugs or feces on them, they can actually wrap them up and transport them securely instead of putting them back in the police vehicle. So that one of the responses I just got probably from the last 6 months, and that has helped us at least 10 times with at least 6 of the people that we've dealt with that really, really needed medical treatment. And it got them to the facility that they need to go to because, dealing with anyone who's unsheltered, unhoused, they don't want to go to hospital. They don't trust them. So having that extra co-response that someone I can just pick up phone and call to come out has helped us a lot.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up question? That
Sure.
seems really great. After that person has received that medical attention, is there kind of like any wraparound services that help them to get connected to more long-term services that could help them transition?
Yes. So once they're taken to the hospital, the medic unit and the behavioral health specialist, they'll talk to the mental health team that's there at the hospital. And usually I'll send an email to the Department of Behavioral Health supervisor, say, hey, this person is being transported by medical. They're going to be at this hospital. Can someone from there reach out to them? I can say at least probably 80% of the ones that we go to hospital, they actually have case managers that it takes a little bit of time to look for, but we try to get them reconnected with their case manager so that their case manager can say, hey, okay, you're at the hospital, I'm coming to you. Recently, probably 2 weeks ago, we had a veteran who was taken to the hospital by the medics, police officer to call me, told me about it the next day. I was able to get with the veteran services, found his case manager. They said his wheelchair was still at this location. I got with the AR unit who said, okay, we're going to run it up our chain to our boss to get the wheelchair taken all the way out to Eagleville, PA, where the guy was taken. And then from there, his case manager actually talked to him and was actually doing quick wraparound service for him to get him back into treatment that he needed to go back to. So it works. It just sometimes it takes a while to get those services, especially to wrap around and looking for their case manager, because sometimes they be like, oh, I don't know who my case manager is. So it's kind of digging and digging to get to where we need to go.
Yeah, but that really kind of intense wraparound support seems to be effective in some cases with folks. So that sounds like a great program. Eric, did you want to? jump in?
Yeah, just want to share two quick things. Hi, everyone. I'm Eric from Louisville, Kentucky. I'm with the Parks Alliance of Louisville, and we are a citywide nonprofit, but we're also managing a 5-acre park, and we're testing a model with a park superintendent who is actually living on site. And so what Helen had mentioned with the place-based care of getting to know people intimately, our entire staff does, folks that we see day in and day out. But just last week, we heard of one individual who, the second thing I wanted to mention is that we recently partnered with Goodwill Industries, which has another way program where they are in a van and picking up houseless individuals and offering them an opportunity to work. And so they're feeding lunch. They are offering a $50 Visa credit card and then connecting to wraparound services. And what last week we heard that one of the folks that was more or less living in the park, she got on the van and has now gotten clean, and she is also housed right now. So one huge win, but yet we are, as I'm sure so many of you all are experiencing, just an enormous amount of challenges. So that's that.
That's great, though, sharing those stories of wins, and also, what has proven to be effective, maybe will be effective for other folks. And so I think that's all great to share. So let's see, we were supposed to kind of transition to breakout discussions right now. Maybe I could do a quick like pulse check of everyone and just see if you would prefer to break out into even smaller groups. Like, I think it would be maybe more like 10 per group, or just maintain this large group discussion. We could kind of talk about some of the other things that came up with folks, encampments we haven't talked about, that kind of thing. Could I get maybe like a quick show of hands using the hand raising button in terms of if you would like to break out into smaller groups? Raise your hand. Okay, that seems like maybe people just want to stick with the large group discussion. That's okay. Yeah, it's not a terribly big group. We try to maintain a intimate conversation, but I think this is working decently well. Okay, so anything else before I move on to the next thing that people wanted to share about sort of park ranger programs, park ambassador programs?
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
This is Charles Hester. I live in Richmond, Virginia. My question is, I want to be very clear, is the prevailing strategy or the best practices now to get our homeless to be better citizens, or to eventually move them from that space to sufficiency, or a combination of both?
I'm not sure anyone could necessarily answer that. I mean, I think it's more about trying to get people connected to services that they need, really, because ultimately it's not terribly safe or healthy to be in parks, but we have a housing crisis, and so that's what people are doing. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone has anything else to add.
It's an interesting question from the parks perspective about the role specifically of the parks agencies. Where do we fit in along this continuum of need? First response, we're hearing a lot of stories about that, but where, as Charles is asking, how far along, or what larger strategy in your city maybe are you informed? Is your actions informing and playing a piece at? That's an interesting question, Charles, for maybe folks, especially in the public sector, to have any responses to.
Yeah, Amanda.
I can go real quick. So, hi, my name is Amanda Terrio. I'm from Parks and Open Spaces up here in Alberta, Canada, in Calgary specifically. So I realize that our system is very different from the ones that I'm talking to you guys about. But one thing that the Parks Department here in Calgary has started to do is coming up with a washroom strategy, because it's something that Parks has ownership over, is the facilities within our parks. And so we're actually, we piloted a washroom attendant program last year, because one of the big things is we want parks to be welcoming to all. And we found that if we had porta potties or what other facilities that people were using in the bathrooms, like intravenous drugs. And so then moms with kids and elderly folks who needed to access those washrooms, it was really difficult because their perception or even reality of being safe in public spaces was hindered. And so we brought in a public attendant washroom program last year. And we hired people who were unhoused in order to be the attendants. It was it was very actually, it was a model that we actually copied from our colleagues up in Edmonton. And it was quite successful. But the biggest thing that I'm sure everyone is familiar with is funding, right? Because we run these pilot projects and then we try to find enduring funding with it. And it's just difficult to find dollars in order to continue these types of programs. So this year, we've actually endeavored to start a washroom strategy program, or like a strategy for the city of Calgary, so that we can then go back to council and say, hey, we did this last year. This was the outcome. City of Edmonton is doing this. And this is the type of dollars that we're looking for in order to continue these type of programs. So it doesn't totally answer you, but I know that's something that it's in with our prerogative because it's our facilities in our parks. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. M. Kirschman, I'm sorry, I don't.
Michael.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on that idea from Calgary, and maybe we can talk offline. But was this 7 days a week, sun up to sundown, or just weekends?
Mhm.
Did you have a problem onboarding them, background checks, getting them to go through the application process? I guess you're shaking your head yes to all that. So there were issues, but you got through them all.
Yeah, there definitely were issues. And we actually partnered with a nonprofit here in Calgary. We put an RFP out saying, hey, we want to work with one of these agencies that are already working with the population. And so the organization that we ended up going with was a bit fraught. So we chose a different agency this year. But then the liability didn't land on the city of Calgary. We were simply just hiring a contractor in order to do the service. So it definitely helped with the trust factor, because it wasn't working with our Calgary Police Force. It wasn't working with our bylaw, right? It was still working adjacent to us, but it was run through an agency where they already built the trust and they already know the clientele. So they dealt with all of the folks in the background checks and everything else.
My only other question is, did they do a good job on the job? Did they actually?
They did a fabulous
okay,
job because they knew the people, right? They were their people. And then, you know, moms with toddlers and older folks were still able to access. We obviously, it was only during daytime hours. We didn't have attendance run during the nighttime. And we only did 3 parks. So we tried 3 different parks, one downtown, one just outside the downtown. And yeah.
Great. Danielle?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Amanda. I'm also up in Canada. I'm with City of Toronto, and yeah, I've heard a little bit about your program and find it really interesting. Toronto is similarly doing a lot of grappling with the washroom question, and we have a lot of washrooms that aren't winterized, and so our washrooms are shutting down over the winter, and it's not as simple as just turning the lights on. There's a lot of bigger questions that happen. Yeah, seems like you're nodding. So, yeah.
Water is a huge issue. I don't know if anyone's heard, but we are in a water crisis right here in Calgary because one of our main lines broke at the beginning of the summer. And so again, when we go into winter, water is a huge issue in our parks because we just don't have access to it, and also because it freezes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's thankfully we're dealing with more flooding than lack of water at the moment. But I was curious on what criteria you used for selecting those 3 parks. Because we're working through some questions around like our washroom enhancement strategy, and that includes things like trying to figure out which of our washrooms will be prioritizing for winterized, and like to what
Such a good
extent that's
question.
related to like whether there's unhoused people living in the park, but also, of course, that
Yeah.
is like a transient question for other visitors. So yeah, the criteria you use would be great to know.
Yeah, we actually picked the 3 parks based on encampments. So we chose Olympic Plaza. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with Calgary. Olympic Plaza is right in the center of downtown. So that was one of our big ones. And then we picked a couple other parks just to kind of see what the differences would be. We did try and house the facilities near the encampments that we knew historically. And part of our challenge now moving forward is trying to come up with that washroom strategy to figure out where we need to put the money, which facility gets it first, and then base that on need. Because we were literally just focusing on the downtown, where we know in the Northeast, we could really benefit from washroom facilities. But yeah, we just picked some close to downtown for first last year.
Okay.
So Natasha, let's go over to you, and then there's some questions that are coming in the chat around encampments and things like that. So that came up a lot in the registration. So I think if folks are up for it, we could maybe talk a little bit about that and just procedures or approaches in that area. But Natasha, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is kind of going to address that as well. I wanted to address Michael's question. Here in Atlanta, we just had a press conference last Tuesday that announced a $60 million homeless trust fund. We have, because our funding is by our businesses, we actually have criminal trespassings that we issue if the business wants us to remove someone from in front of their property, if they're blocking the sidewalks or anything like that. So we have kind of set up a compassionate encampment closure, as well as with our public safety officers. They have the authority, not like our police, but they have the authority to remove people. And so we've been doing that removal for years. But because we now have an outreach team, we now have someone who can come out and offer services instead of just asking them to move. Now, with encampments in the downtown space, we give our folks who are in encampments 3 weeks. Outreach will start doing engagement and offering them services. We let them know that the encampment will be closed. We don't give a date, but we try to give at least 3 weeks to remove individuals and give them opportunities, and also collaborate with other agencies to provide housing before we close that encampment down.
Great, thank you, Natasha. And I think Allie chimed in on this too. Allie, would you be willing to chime in verbally, maybe?
I think she had to run.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so she was talking about that. Yeah, and I'm aware of other cities, I don't know if it would be helpful, but that kind of have different similar sorts of protocols, or they actually even will sort of rate encampments based on certain criteria about health, safety, threats, whether there's major destruction of natural resources, things like that, or if they're an imminent threat. So I know there are kind of some sort of ranking things that go with that. And so I could maybe try to share some of that information as well, if that would be helpful to folks. Terrence, did you just have your hand up?
Yeah, so on the encampment, what the police do with the teams is they do an encampment resolution. It depends on certain encampments. I was telling Ali that the police will give them 24-hour notice. If it's seen built within 24 hours, they'll give them a notice that, hey, you have 24 hours to take down the structure, because if it's in a property owner business at the back of the entrance, then they can. Then the city will actually give them 72 to a week to remove any other type of encampments, or some resolutions if it's a huge encampments where, like it was our convention center, they actually gave them 30 days, and they actually had an outreach team, the police and sanitation come out for the whole 30 days saying, we're offering you services to go here, we'll take you here and there. And then after 30 days, they actually put up signs saying no trespassing, no loitering in this area. And a lot of the encampments that do pop up, the police say, hey, you gotta take it down for so many hours. And most of them do take it down right away. Some of them, they try to give them time because a few of them have become hazard conditions where two of them started fires next to property. So that's what actually forced them to go with 24 hours to 72 hours within the last probably 9 months. And then on Amanda, she said something about restrooms. What the city of Philadelphia did was they actually built last year an outdoor bathroom next to one of their buildings that actually has a place for homeless clients can use a restroom if there's not nothing available during the evening time. So it has a sink, a bathroom, and it's clean every 2 hours. They actually have a staff member from outreach that cleans it every 2 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Stepped up kind of maintenance of these spaces. So it looks like Natasha put a link into the chat about Houston's encampment response strategy, so that, something to check out. So we can come back to encampments, or if anyone has anything to add about encampments as well. One of the things that came up in the registration questions was that connecting people to services is obviously, a great strategy. We've heard about that today quite a bit. But one of the problems seems to be when people don't want to accept services for one reason or another, and that those are the same people that you're seeing in the parks over and over and that are kind of moving from place to place. I know that there are cities that actually will identify the people who are the highest users of first responder services, and they will do like a coordinated strategy to try to connect and engage with those people to get them services. So that's one model. Again, I could kind of send some information about that, but I'm curious if other folks, I'm sure other folks are dealing with this issue. If you have any strategies, kind of promising or emerging strategies for really kind of effectively getting people connected to services who may be a little bit reticent to take them on. I think, Terrence, you talked about a couple of things that were interesting, but curious to get people's challenges, strategies on that particular issue. Are you all struggling with that? Like head nods, if so. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's probably one of the tougher things.
If I could add to what you're saying, Diana, this is something that we absolutely struggle with in Seattle. And one approach that has been taken by the new waterfront park, we have a brand new fancy waterfront development in the center of Seattle, and it's amazing. And as part of that redevelopment, they hired an outreach worker to really properly understand the people that were using those areas. And I interviewed him as part of my research, and he was great in saying one of the key things of his job was firstly just to be there day in, day out, that familiar face, and understand when someone was having a bad day versus needing a real source of help in that moment. And slowly over time, he started to build those relationships and connect people to services, and some things have stuck. And I think probably Natasha would agree with this, that all of this can take time, and can be frustrating when you want a solution, and some of these are just sort of deep, intractable problems that only by hanging on in there day in, day out, by talking and getting to know people, can we start to sort of move forward.
Yeah. I'm curious too, and this you know, I know may be contentious, but I'm just asking what people's kind of thinking is on this. So we've talked about, you know, I know a lot of cities are kind of doing park ranger programs, park ambassador programs, trying to, you know, minimize just like calls to police for no reason. But there are also situations in the registration anyway, it seemed like people were talking about some fairly significant issues like just pretty major destruction of property or facilities, like electrical infrastructure, you know, aggressive behavior based on, you know, mental health or substance abuse issues. And so in those situations, which is not everybody, but I'm curious what you all think the role of law enforcement is in those situations, or if that's just something that you are kind of trying not to involve and really trying to involve more social service help even for those things. But it did seem like there were some things that were, you know, potentially dangerous or unsafe. And I'm curious if you still do have a relationship or a strategy that involves enforcement at any points in what you're dealing with. Just curious. Some people talk about, oh, go ahead.
I can hop back in. So the city of Calgary absolutely does. We have a really good relationship with one of our outreach programs. It used to be called the DOPE team, and now it's called the HELP team, the Human Centered Engagement Liaison and Partnership Program. And so the funding, 80% of the funding comes from the city of Calgary, 20% comes from the province, and they are essentially our first responders. And it's something that, and it's a team that the Calgary Police and our Calgary Bylaw and our Calgary Fire Department actually call when there is someone in crisis. And it's beyond like even medical. Like we have first responders and whatnot, but we also have the DOPE team. If they're first on site, they also can, they're trained to provide naloxone. But I think for us, I mean, we always try to de-escalate. But at the end of the day, it has to be public health and safety. So we have a good relationship with our city fire and our city police department, unfortunately.
Yeah. Natasha?
So yes, we have off-duty police officers on our team, so that if anything escalates, we can have them come out. But normally we keep everyone separate. We don't have any of our police officers go out with the outreach team. And interestingly enough, I always try to get people to understand that public safety and homelessness should be a separate issue. Again, building that trust with people so that you're not in a situation where someone is threatening you or they feel unsafe is really key. But then we also have Policing Alternatives and Diversion, which is our PAD program, which is a completely separate program outside of our outreach team, where if someone who is unhoused is committing a crime or is about to commit a crime, you can call them, which they also work like an outreach team, have resources, and they can take that alternative route instead of incarcerating them.
All right, let's see. We talked about a lot of the things that sort of came up. I think one of the issues that I think came up was not enough personnel and resources to kind of address these issues. But I wonder if you know, kind of more focus on partnerships and maybe some of the things you've heard today, if you're not already trying to engage in partnerships, could sort of help with that particular situation. But it seems like that's definitely something, especially one of the things that came up is just sort of the overwhelming scope of the problem. It seems like there's more volume, there's more frequency, it's getting worse every year kind of thing. And it's just tough to kind of keep up with it. So I don't know if folks have any thoughts about, like, have you increased staff to deal with these issues? Have you instituted any other kinds of programs? Just curious if there are, I know we've covered some of this, but any other thoughts about that in terms of increasing capacity, whether it's leveraging partnerships or increasing capacity in-house?
Can I also add a question to that?
Yeah, please.
We're finding a lot of families now with younger kids becoming unhoused. it's an unfortunate reality, and is obviously we try and house them with our partners as soon as possible. But even during at the beginning parts of COVID, I was part of a team that had to decant our homeless shelters because we had to for social isolation, and I think we had 20 families that were homeless at the beginning of COVID. And I'm not joking, within 48 hours, we had them housed. So I think it's unfortunately like a willingness for to take on those type of tenants who don't have 3 months worth of rent behind them. But it's definitely something that we're constantly running up against is kiddos, is kids in shelter. So if anyone has any great ideas or something that you guys are doing in your cities, love to hear it.
Any response to that? Yeah, that's a tough one, family homelessness. Glad that they were housed fairly quickly, though. I feel like often in cities, not always, but there may be some more opportunities for families. A couple other issues, I don't know if people want to talk about these specifically, but things that came up. Loose needles. And I think, you know, some cities have created strategies whereby they have loose needle collection in different places that have maybe decreased the amount of loose needles in their parks. What was another one that was coming up? Oh, the whole idea of kind of the destruction of natural resources, because there's this tension between needing to protect natural resources and sort of be managers of the land, but also wanting to, you know, be compassionate to people. So it seems like there's a little bit of a tension there. So I'm not sure if people have strategies for kind of dealing with that piece of it as well. So those are two separate things, but I just didn't, you know, if folks have anything they want to talk about on those two issues particularly, or anything else. So I will mention, I don't think I mentioned this yet. We've had a couple of programs in the past, a webinar and a peer conversation that talked about strategies to address some of these things. One of them was Olympia, Washington, that has done a lot of work with actually like sort of GIS and like data analysis around their loose needles, and they've really dramatically decreased them through what their efforts have been. And they have a park ranger program and some other strategies. So I can share, since you're all members, I can share the links to those webinars, and the peer conversation was very specifically about park rangers. So there could be some helpful tips in there for folks. I think the content is still really relevant. So.
And we should grab some of the notes in the chat.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
I'll share, you know,
The
people
links.
are sharing some good resources here in the chat. We'll share that out afterwards as well. Danielle?
Yeah, thanks. It's the question I was going to ask is less related to those particular pieces, which might be more about where I am in the realm of parks planning. So I'm at the City of Toronto, coming from the municipal perspective, and my team is less out in the field, like interacting with those who are unhoused, and are more related to developing the park strategy across the whole city. And so this is our long-term parks planning framework. We try and figure out where we should be getting new parks, which areas have both like too little parks or also parks that aren't meeting certain quality standards, etc. And I will say right now, our long-term parks planning framework doesn't reference the topic of encampment, because it's not something that we plan for, because it's not the ultimate end goal of, I guess, thinking about the park spaces. And doesn't seem like there's much of an appetite at the city to have within the park strategy a plan for encampment, because this is then, I get the acknowledgement that this is the inevitability within our parks. But I was curious if any other municipal staff or those who are in like municipalities and have read something, like if you've seen anything related to encampments addressed in any like parks policy documents, or if things are like about the forward planning perspective, or if it's more of a reactive planning about when encampments show up.
That's a great point. I think a lot of stuff I've seen is kind of how to deal with encampments once they're there, kind of thing. But if anyone has any resources on that, we can look into some things too. Feel free to share in the chat. Helen?
Yeah, I was just looking at the park plan for Woodruff Park in Atlanta because and I had to refresh my memory. It has a whole section on social services and equity. I can't see anything specifically on encampments, but I remember being really struck by the Woodruff Park plan in the fact that it had that section. So I've just dropped that into the chat. That's a horrible link. So I'll try and find a better link. But then I was also going to react to your comments about syringes and what we do about those, and then that horrible issue of basically the destruction landscape as a result of people using parks for living spaces. And this is something that has featured quite heavily in my interviews for research. And sometimes people have mused about the solutions they feel they would like to put in place. So an obvious one with syringes is the installation of boxes where people can safely dispose of used needles. And in terms of areas that are delicate within a space, should never be used for camping. In fact, could be dangerous for unhoused individuals to use a space to camp. People have suggested that they could put up park signs, big signs saying, please don't pitch a tent here, please don't stay overnight here, or this is an environment in which there are plants that could be dangerous for you, be it poison ivy or something like that. But the thing that's come up time and time again in these interviews are the politics of putting up signs and providing needle disposal boxes, and people feeling that they wouldn't be palatable solutions for people higher up in their organization. It's something I don't have an answer to particularly, and maybe others would want to comment, but sometimes there are some just really sort of simple low-tech solutions that for whatever reason are tough to employ.
Yeah, I think Michael asked a question in the chat also earlier on about if folks were feeling political pressure from above for clearing the parks too. And obviously we've seen the case go to the courts that was referenced too. But yeah, it seems like the political climate kind of ebbs and flows, and then staff is often can be kind of your heads can be spinning on a change in direction with a new mayor or a new council, right? I don't know if you guys have any horror stories about that. Dan, I think also CJ, I just thought maybe we should throw it out there because we didn't get to do a nonprofit group. CJ had
Oh,
a
yes, I'm
question.
sorry.
Yeah,
Yes, I
earlier
meant to go back on that one. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, CJ was asking, that their organization manages one small plaza in their city, and so CJ's the only staff person, so curious if there are other small nonprofits here and how that they're able to engage with or assist unhoused park users. I think she's referencing that it's tough to forge positive, or the only thing you can do is kind of forge positive relationships with folks calling for services when needed. But are there other smaller organizations that are doing some work in this area on the call? Said receive, is that?
Yeah, this is Sevi.
Sevi?
So to answer CJ's question, I was going to reach out to her later, but we are a little bit bigger of a plaza / park in downtown San Francisco. So San Francisco, as you already know, we are on the other extreme of a lot of these things, and in the sense that the park rangers do a pretty good job keeping unhoused from the parks, but they end up in the streets. So that's the other challenge, and sidewalks and so on. So in our plaza or park, we're more of a outside of the park and rec system. So we're a nonprofit conservancy that takes care of the 87 acres in downtown San Francisco. It's a pretty good size area. We have our own rec facilities and so on. So there's always traffic here. We serve about 6 million people on an annual basis. Lots of special events, concerts from April through October, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, free concerts. So there's always traffic, people, unhoused individuals going through our park. But what we have created is basically a system where we tolerate it during the day, as long as they're not interfering with anything that we're putting out as programs or other things, as far as larger events and so on that our Great Lawn is used for. So as far as knowing some of the names, the individuals, we get to know them. Our security 24/7 that's available on our campus also, keeps track of them. So actually, in a way, we are their guardians, at the same time also allowing them to also sleep in the park between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. when the park is technically closed, similar to other city parks. So we have a good relationship built with them. It's when they stray, that's when we call 911 or the local police office that's about 2 blocks away from us. And they're very helpful to work through that. And then when we host the larger conferences, so our Moscone Convention Center is right below us. And when larger conventions are held, like next week, we have our big Salesforce convention with 60,000 people attending. The park is fully cleared out with the help of police and us, meaning we go through every nook and cranny and basically, clean it out so that the visitors to the community, get to enjoy the park at its fullest. So a little bit of both, but at the same time, the one positive thing on our side is that we're very well funded. So we have all these 5- and 6-star hotels around. So it's a different funding model that actually pay into our budget. So our budget of about $13 million is pretty much, I would say, 99% funded by the hotels and other business entities that are around our block and in the block.
Thank you. I am going to just quickly put, we have about 5 or 6 minutes left. Before people start to jump off, I'm just going to put our session evaluation survey in the chat. If folks could just take a second to click on that and open it up in a new window before you leave. Your feedback really is valuable to us as we try to improve and meet the needs of our network in doing our program. So just wanted to throw that in there, but we can keep talking for a few more minutes. Are there any other issues that we haven't brought up today that folks either want to share challenges about or have questions for their peers about how they're dealing with certain things? I want to leave some kind of free open time. Yeah, Ethan?
So we're a little bit different in that our park isn't actually open yet, but we'll be, I think everybody else here is pretty well established, but we'll be a 10-acre urban park. And curious if there's any policy or even physical infrastructure things that those of you that have been open for a while wish you had done ahead of time before opening that maybe we should pay attention to. That's in that size of 9 to 10 acres.
Good question. Are you talking about policy or like design elements? Or
Either one, either policy or even physical, structure of design. Any regrets out there, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Hi, I'm Diana. I work in Sarasota, Florida, and we have a 10-acre park that's only 2 years old. One of the infrastructure pieces we put in place was our security system at night is pretty darn cool. Outside of park hours, it monitors movement, and we have speakers, like physical speakers, like blah, blah, that says the park is closed, and if the movement doesn't, please leave the park. And then if after so many prompts, if they don't leave, then our police department is called. It's monitored by a place in Pittsburgh. And that has seemed to reduce the overall overnight stays in our park. but that was built in by design.
Aisling, am I pronouncing that right?
It's Ashling. I'm
Oh,
calling from
Ashling.
the city of Minneapolis, and we inherited a 4-acre park right in the downtown center, and it has no bathroom structures. And that is one of the things that is just, it's a huge burden. We have 2 porta potties now that are behind chain, they're fenced in, that we have to have staff on site to open and close. We've had experience with people sleeping on top of this structure or trying to break through to get into it. And I know that's one of the big things that we're looking for right now is those washroom facilities and bathroom facilities. And I think our team that's on here would all say we really wish somebody would have planned for that. And just throwing onto that, also a question for our Canadian friends or anyone else. Has anyone had seen or have installed in their parks these self-cleaning bathrooms?
I can tell you, this is Jennifer Warnma in Lexington. We designed a new urban park. Hi, Ethan. His park is right down the street from my park. We designed a new urban park with ARPA funding. We're constructing it with general funds, but we did, as part of that design and lots of stakeholder input, purchase, it's not yet in, but purchased a self-cleaning restroom. I believe my colleague Justin Carey, he should be on this Zoom as well. But if you want to reach out to the city of Lexington here in about maybe 9 or so months, we would be happy to let you know how that's going. We'll have one stall that's self-cleaning, very active, busy part of our city. So we're looking forward to seeing how this progresses. It's going to be the first for us.
Great, thank you. It looks like Rosa has her hand up, and so we'll maybe just take one more and then just need a second to kind of wrap us up here. Rosa, do you want to jump in?
Hi, just on the topic of the self-cleaning bathrooms, I don't have one at our park. We're actually working to get a different kind of bathroom, but I do know that there is one at Madison Square Park, which is also in New York. Every single time I have tried to go there to try it, number one, most people don't carry around a quarter. So even if it was open, they wouldn't be able to pay to go in. But every single time I have gone, it has been closed and it has been broken. It is not maintained well. There is literally a puddle of urine on the outside, so it stinks. I would strongly recommend it. I know that this particular model takes 15 minutes to clean, and for an area that is as dense as New York City, something that can take 15 minutes to clean, you're missing a lot of people. And it's literally one stall, and there is I believe it's a 3 to 5 foot clearance area required on all sides for maintenance of it. So the sizing requirement to fit in one stall is enormous. Those are all the reasons why we are fighting to get a different model than this one. But perhaps the one that you're getting is better, more efficient in space, et cetera, et cetera. But I personally would not recommend that based on what I have seen and not been able to access in New York City.
Thank you. That's helpful. Okay, so we're at time here. So again, if you could just take the survey that I put in the chat, it's really helpful for us. I just want to thank Helen and Natasha for sharing their work and their perspectives, and all of you for joining us today to have this conversation. We hope you're leaving the session with some new ideas that you can take back to your communities. And we also hope to see you at a future City Parks Alliance event. So we hope you have a great rest of your day and take care, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good one.